The white clapboard church stood against the October sky like a promise. Ethan Hayes and his son Timothy climbed the wooden steps, their Sunday clothes stiff and new. Inside, hymns rose warm and welcoming. Families filled the pews, their voices joining in familiar harmony. Ethan held Timothy's hand as they found space in the back row. The boy was 8, small for his age. With his mother's dark eyes, those eyes took in everything: the pressed dresses, the polished boots, the way people belonged to each other here. The service ended with a final Amen. Outside, the congregation spilled onto the lawn in clusters. Mothers gathered near the fence, fathers by the hitching posts, children darting between the groups like schools of fish. Ethan approached a family standing near the church steps. "Morning," he said. Touching his hat brim, "I'm Ethan Hayes. Just moved here from Kansas. This is my son Timothy." The man nodded politely. "Welcome to town." His eyes drifted past Ethan's shoulder. His wife smiled, said nothing. Their children had already run off. "We're working at the mill," Ethan continued. "Carpentry mostly. Fine town you have here." "That's good," the man said. "Well, enjoy your Sunday." They moved away before Ethan could respond. He tried again with another family. Same polite nods, same drift of attention elsewhere, same invisible wall that rose the moment he opened his mouth. Timothy tugged his sleeve. "Pa, can I play with those boys?" Ethan looked where his son pointed. 3 boys kicked a ball near the oak tree. Their laughter carried across the lawn, like music Timothy couldn't join. "Not today, son," Ethan said quietly. They walked home down Main Street. The October light slanted gold through the aspens, beautiful and indifferent. Church bells echoed behind them, fading with each step. Their boots raised small clouds of dust that settled back into silence. Timothy's hand felt very small in his. At their room above the general store, Timothy sat on the edge of his narrow bed. Will we make friends here?" "Pa." Ethan looked out the window at the closed doors of homes they'd passed. Each one might as well have been a fortress. He thought of Sarah, how she'd made friends wherever they went. Her warmth opening doors Ethan couldn't unlock alone, but Sarah was gone. "We'll see, son," he said. "We'll see." He didn't believe it. This town had its circles already drawn. He and Timothy were ink that wouldn't take to the page. That night, lying in the dark, Ethan listened to Timothy's breathing slow into sleep. The boy had cried quietly into his pillow, thinking his father couldn't hear. Ethan had pretended not to notice, giving his son that small dignity. Outside, laughter drifted from somewhere down the street. A family gathering. Probably Sunday supper, with friends and neighbors. The kind of evening Ethan couldn't imagine for himself anymore. He closed his eyes and tried not to count how many Sundays stretched ahead. The second Sunday felt like the first, only heavier. Timothy's hope had dimmed to something cautious. He didn't ask to play with the other children. He just stood close to his father and watched. The third Sunday, they arrived early. Ethan thought maybe that would help, being there when people came in. But the families had their own pews, their own routines. The Hayes men remained strangers in the back row. Ethan noticed things in those weeks. The community wasn't cruel. They were simply complete. Bonds had formed over years, through births and burials and barn raisings. The circles were full. There was no malice in the exclusion, which somehow made it worse. Sunday 4 arrived cold and clear. November had touched the aspens, turning them to flame. Inside the church, hymns rose as always. Ethan sang quietly, Timothy mouthing the words he was learning. After the final prayer, they filed out into the crisp air, and someone was watching. June Brennan stood at the edge of the lawn, apart from the clusters but not quite alone. Her niece Sarah stood beside her, 17 and kind-faced. June was perhaps 55, her gray hair pinned neat, her dress simple and clean. She'd been watching the Hayes men for weeks. She knew the geography of their isolation because she'd walked it herself. 3 years since her husband Tom died, 3 years of being the widow at the periphery. She saw what others overlooked: a decent man protecting his boy, both aching for a place to belong. She'd had enough of watching. June crossed the lawn directly, her steps purposeful. Conversations paused as she passed. She stopped in front of Ethan and Timothy, her smile warm and certain. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "would you and your son join us for Sunday dinner?" Ethan froze. Timothy's eyes went wide. Ethan started, then stopped. The offer seemed too good to be real. "We don't want to impose, ma'am." June's smile deepened, something knowing in it. "You're not imposing. You're accepting." The words hung between them, careful and clear. She wasn't offering charity. She was offering choice. "This is my niece Sarah," June continued. "She helps me on Sundays. We'd be pleased to have you both." Sarah nodded, her smile genuine. "We make too much food anyway. It'd be nice to have company." Timothy looked up at his father, hope naked on his face. Ethan felt something crack in his chest. Pride, maybe, or fear, or the careful walls he'd built to protect them both from more disappointment. This woman was offering what no one else had: a seat at a table, a place to belong, even if just for an afternoon. "We'd be honored, ma'am," he heard himself say. June's eyes held understanding that went deeper than politeness. "Good. We live just past the church. The house with the blue shutters. Give us a half hour to get the roast ready." She touched Timothy's shoulder gently. "I hope you like chicken." "Young man." Yes, ma'am," Timothy whispered. As June and Sarah walked away, Ethan felt eyes on them. Other congregants had noticed the exchange. Some looked curious. Some looked faintly surprised. No one said anything. Timothy gripped his father's hand. "Pa, did that really happen?" "I think it did, son. She seems nice." "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "She does." They waited the half hour walking slowly through town, then found the house with blue shutters. It sat modest and neat at the edge of the settlement, a garden gone to winter sleep beside it. Lamplight glowed warm through lace curtains. Ethan and Timothy stood on the porch, suddenly nervous. Timothy straightened his collar. Ethan knocked. The door opened to warmth and the smell of roasting chicken. "Come in," June said. "Welcome." They stepped across the threshold into a different world. The house was small but clean. Worn furniture polished with care. A fire crackled in the hearth. The table was set for 4, simple plates and cups arranged with quiet dignity. Sarah took their coats. "Sit. Please. Dinner's almost ready." Ethan hesitated, every instinct warning him against trusting kindness. He'd learned in the past year that goodness could be withdrawn as easily as it was offered. But Timothy was already moving toward the table. Drawn by warmth he'd been starved for. They sat. June brought out the chicken, golden and fragrant, roasted vegetables from her garden, fresh bread, apple butter, nothing fancy, but abundant and made with care. Mr. Hayes," June said, passing the serving dish. "Tell me about Kansas." So he did. Slowly at first, then easier. He told her about the farm where he'd grown up, about learning carpentry from his father, about meeting Sarah at a church social, marrying her, dreaming of their own place. Timothy listened, hearing stories he half remembered. "Hey, and you came west for a fresh start?" June asked gently. Ethan met her eyes. She knew. Somehow she knew there was loss behind the move. "My wife died," he said quietly. "Fever. Last winter. The farm had too many memories. I thought Colorado might be better for the boy." June nodded. No pity in her expression, just understanding. "I lost my Tom 3 years back. Heart gave out while he was mending the fence. One minute he was there. The next he wasn't. I'm sorry." Ethan said, "So am I, for your loss." June passed the bread. But we're still here. Aren't we still setting tables? Still making meals? Still finding reasons to keep going?" She looked at Timothy, who was listening with solemn attention. "And sometimes the reasons find us." Sarah engaged Timothy in conversation about school, about whether he liked reading, what games he knew. The boy answered shyly at first. Then, with growing ease, Sarah had a gift for making him comfortable. After dinner, Sarah brought out a checkerboard. "Want to learn I can teach you?" Timothy looked at his father, who nodded. The children moved to the corner while June and Ethan cleared the table. "Nadia, you didn't have to do this," Ethan said quietly, washing plates in the basin. "I wanted to," June replied, drying. "I've watched you both for weeks, seen how the town treats you. They're not unkind. No, just blind." She set down a dried plate. "Sometimes people need someone to show them what they're missing. You're good people. Mr. Hayes, anyone with eyes can see it. Call me Ethan, please." "Ethan. Then, and I'm June." He glanced at her. This woman who'd opened her door when everyone else kept theirs closed. She wasn't trying to save them. She was simply including them. As natural as breathing. "Why us?" he asked. June considered the question. "Because I remember what it feels like to be alone, in a crowded room. Because Tom always said the measure of a town is how it treats strangers. And because that boy of yours deserves friends, and you deserve a place to rest your burdens." She smiled. "Also, I make too much food and hate eating alone." "I know." From the corner. Timothy laughed at something Sarah said. The sound pierced Ethan's heart, pure joy, unguarded, the first time he'd heard it in months. "Thank you," he said. The words inadequate for what he felt. "Come next Sunday." June said, "And the Sunday after. Let's make this a habit." Walking home that evening, Timothy chattered about Sarah, about the checkers game, about June's apple butter. His hand swung free in his father's, no longer gripping tight against uncertainty. Ethan looked up at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. Maybe, he thought, maybe this town has room for us after all. Sunday dinners became ritual. Each week, Ethan and Timothy walked to the house with blue shutters. Each week, June welcomed them like they'd always belonged there. The meals were simple but rich with something more than food. Conversation flowed easy. June drew out their stories with genuine interest, shared her own without bitterness. She told them about Tom, how he'd taught her that grief softens if you let people in, instead of pushing them away. He was a quiet man, she said one Sunday in mid-November. Spoke through his hands more than his mouth. But kind. Always kind. Timothy and Sarah had become fast friends. The girl taught him card games, let him help with small chores, treated him like the little brother she'd never had. Timothy bloomed under the attention, his shyness peeling away like old paint. Ethan watched his son laugh and felt something loosen in his chest. This was what he'd moved west to find, not just work, but community. A place where Timothy could be a child again. Through June's natural warmth. Cracks appeared in the town's walls. The pastor's wife nodded to them after the 5th Sunday service. "Good to see you settling in. Mr. Hayes," I asked Deb. "At the general store," the merchant said. "Morning. Ethan, how's the work at the mill?" Small things. Brief exchanges. But they mattered. Timothy was invited to help arrange flowers in the church one Saturday. He came home proud, telling his father about the vases he'd filled, the ladies who'd thanked him. "Mrs. Patterson said I did a fine job. Pop said I had a good eye for color." Ethan pulled his son close. "I'm glad, Timothy." One gray afternoon, June asked Ethan to fix a loose board on her porch. He brought his tools, grateful for a way to give back. While he worked, June brought him coffee, steam rising into the cold air. "You're good with your hands," she observed. "My father taught me. Said a man who can build things can always make his way in the world. Tom used to say the same." June wrapped her shawl tighter. "Said there's honor in work done well, even if no one sees it." Okay. Ethan hammered in the final nail, tested the board. Solid. There. Should hold through winter. I appreciate it. I've been meaning to get to it. But some things need a man's strength. Happy to help. "You've done more for us than I can repay." June's expression turned serious. "You don't owe me anything." Ethan. "That's not why I invited you." "I know, but still." They stood on the porch as the afternoon light faded. Down the street, smoke rose from chimneys. Families gathered for supper. Ethan thought about the room above the store, where he and Timothy would eat their simple meal, and felt the contrast less sharply than before. He had this, at least, these Sunday afternoons. This warmth. "Come for Thanksgiving," June said suddenly. "Sarah and I usually do a small meal, but we'd like you both to join us." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." June met his eyes. "You're not alone anymore." "Ethan, neither of you. It's time you stopped thinking that way." Walking home that evening, Timothy said, "I like Miss June. Pa, she's like how I remember Mama being warm. You know?" Ethan's heart clenched. "I know." "Son, do you think we'll stay here in this town?" "I think we might." Timothy smiled, the last light catching his face. "Good. I hope we do." Just that night, Ethan lay awake thinking about June's words, about the way her coffee had warmed his hands, about how natural it felt to stand on her porch and talk about nothing and everything. He thought about Sarah, his wife, and felt the grief shift into something gentler. Not gone, but changing, making room for something new. He wasn't sure what that meant yet, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. November deepened into frost warnings and early dark. June asked Ethan to help winterize her garden before the hard freeze came. "The roses need cutting back," she explained after Sunday dinner. "And the beds need mulch. Tom always did it, but I never learned the knack. I'd be happy to help." They worked on a Saturday afternoon, Sarah watching Timothy while Ethan and June knelt in the cold earth. The garden had been beautiful in summer. June said, now it needed protecting for the sleep ahead. Ethan cut back the rose canes with careful precision. June spread mulch around the roots, her hands sure despite claiming inexperience. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Tom planted these the year we married, June said. Touching a thorny stem, said every home needed roses. They'll come back strong in spring. I hope so. She paused. Some things survive winter, others don't. You can't always tell which until the thaw. Ethan glanced at her, wondering if she was still talking about roses. The afternoon light slanted gold through the bare trees. Their breath made small clouds. Ethan reached for the pruning shears at the same moment June did. Their hands touched, both froze. The contact lasted only a heartbeat. But something passed between them. Awareness. Possibility. A question neither was ready to ask aloud. They pulled back simultaneously. Sorry, Ethan said. No. June stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. I should check on the children. Adi. But she didn't move right away. She stood there, looking at him. And Ethan saw in her eyes the same uncertainty he felt. Then she turned and went inside. Ethan stayed in the garden, hands still tingling from that brief touch. He told himself it meant nothing. June was being kind. That's all. Opening her home and her table didn't mean she wanted anything more, but his heart knew differently. Inside, he could hear Timothy's laughter, Sarah's voice teaching him something. Normal. Domestic sounds that made his chest ache with longing. He finished the mulching alone, working until the light failed, at dinner that evening. Everything felt different. The ease had turned awkward. June avoided his eyes. Ethan found himself hyper-aware of her every movement, the way she passed the bread, the way she smiled at Timothy, the way her voice caught on certain words. Walking home, Timothy said, You're quiet, Pa. Just tired. Son. But it wasn't tiredness. It was fear. He was falling for June Brennan, this widow who'd saved them from loneliness, and he had no idea if she felt the same, or if pursuing such feelings would destroy the one good thing they'd found in this town. What if she only saw him as a friend? What if the community that was barely accepting them would reject them entirely for presuming too much? What if he risked everything and lost that night? Timothy said his prayers and added a new line. And thank you for Miss June and Sarah. For night at Detendo. They make things feel like home. Ethan tucked his son in, throat tight. Timothy's voice was small in the dark. Do you think Miss June really likes us? I think she does, son. Good. Because I like her too. A lot. Ethan kissed his forehead. Sleep now. But sleep wouldn't come for Ethan. He lay awake, remembering the touch of June's hand, the look in her eyes, the way everything felt, both right and terrifying. The garden needed protecting for winter. She'd said. He wondered what else needed protecting. And from what? December arrived with bitter cold, and the church's Christmas social planning. After services, families gathered on the lawn, despite the chill, organizing committees for decorating, baking, caroling. Ethan and Timothy stood at the edge of the discussions, listening. No one turned them away, but no one invited them closer either. Mrs. Patterson organized the baking committee. We'll need pies, cookies, and bread. Martha. Can you handle the pies, Elizabeth? The cookies. Women nodded. accepted assignments. June stood in the circle. But when she glanced at Ethan, she said nothing. The decorating committee formed next. Men volunteered to cut pine boughs, string garland, arrange the church. The mill foreman was there, a man Ethan worked beside daily. He didn't suggest Ethan's name. Timothy watched the children being assigned to carol practice. Three boys his age were picked to carry candles. Timothy's hand tightened on his father's coat. No one called his name. They walked home in silence, the festive planning echoing behind them. Ethan felt the old familiar weight settling back on his shoulders. The warmth of the past weeks had been an illusion. They were tolerated, perhaps accepted at June's table, but not truly part of things. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At the general store, Ethan bought their weekly supplies. The merchant was friendly enough, chatting about the weather, the social, the preparations. Going to be a fine celebration, he said. Whole town comes together for Christmas. Ethan nodded, paid, left. Outside, Timothy waited on the steps. Two boys from church approached. The same ones who'd been picked for candle duty. You coming to carol practice? One asked. Timothy brightened. Am I supposed to? The boys exchanged glances. Well, I guess, if you want. Anonym. I do, Timothy said eagerly. The second boy shifted. My ma says you're not really part of things yet. You're just here. The words landed like stones. Timothy's face went carefully blank. Oh, okay. The boys wandered off. Timothy stood very still. Ethan watched his son's shoulders curl inward, watched him blink hard against tears he wouldn't shed in public. The emperor. Every instinct screamed to gather the boy up, to protect him, to make the hurt stop. But he couldn't. He had no power here. That night, Timothy was silent through their meager dinner. He went to bed without protest, turned his face to the wall. Ethan sat alone in the dark, listening to his son cry quietly into his pillow. He'd failed, brought them here, promised better, and delivered only different loneliness. June's kindness had made him hope, made him believe integration was possible. But one woman couldn't change a whole town. Maybe they should leave. Try another place. Another fresh start. Keep moving until they found somewhere that wanted them. The next Sunday, Ethan composed a careful excuse. Told June they couldn't make dinner. He had work to catch up on at the mill. June received the message after services. Her face neutral, but her eyes understanding. She didn't push, just nodded and said, another time. Then, Sarah looked disappointed. Timothy looked crushed, walking back to their room. Timothy said, Why aren't we going to Miss June's, Pa? We've imposed enough. But she invited us. She wants us there. Timothy. Ethan's voice came out sharper than intended. Not today, please. His son went quiet, and Ethan hated himself for it. That afternoon, alone in their room while the rest of the town prepared for Christmas, Ethan stared out the window. Families passed below, arms full of pine boughs and packages. Laughter drifted up. They were outsiders. Still. Always. He thought about packing their few belongings, buying tickets on the next stage out, starting over. Again. Christmas week arrived cold and gray. The town buzzed with preparations, garlands strung between lampposts, wreaths on doors. the church glowing with candlelight each evening for practice. Ethan and Timothy existed in the margins of the celebration, spectators to joy they couldn't join. It was also the anniversary. 1 year since Sarah's death. Ethan hadn't told Timothy. Didn't want to burden the boy with adult grief, but he felt it like a stone in his chest. Heavy and cold. This time last year, they'd still been a family, broken by illness. Yes, but together, now they were just fragments. Christmas Eve fell on a Friday. The mill closed early. Ethan and Timothy climbed the stairs to their room as the sun set, carrying their meager provisions: bread, cheese, a bit of dried beef, no tree, no decorations, no one waiting for them. Timothy set the table without being asked. The silence between them had grown thick over the past week. Pa, the boy finally said, "Did I do something wrong?" "Number son, why would you think that?" "We stopped going to Miss June's." "We stopped everything." Timothy's voice cracked. "I thought things were getting better. I thought maybe we'd found a place." Ethan sat heavily. "I thought so too." "Then why did we stop?" How to explain to an 8-year-old that hope hurts worse than despair when it gets snatched away, that watching your child excluded cuts deeper than any personal rejection. Sometimes things don't work out like we plan. Ethan said tiredly, "But we didn't even try. We just gave up." The accusation stung because it was true. A knock at the door startled them both. Ethan opened it to find June Brennan standing in the hallway, breath fogging in the cold. "I say that, ish." A basket covered with checked cloth in her arms. "Miss June." Timothy breathed. She looked past Ethan to the sparse room, the meager table, the boy's hopeful face. Her expression turned sad and knowing. "May I come in?" Ethan stepped aside, numb with surprise. June set the basket on the table. Didn't remove her coat. She looked at Ethan with clear eyes that saw everything he was trying to hide. "I know you're hurting," she said quietly. "I know you're thinking of leaving. But running from loneliness just brings it with you." "Ethan, I know. I tried." He wanted to deny it, but couldn't find the words. "I ran after Tom died." She continued. "I thought maybe if I went somewhere new, somewhere he'd never been, the grief wouldn't follow." But it did, because loneliness isn't about the place. It's about whether we let people in or push them away. Timothy watched her, still as stone. "This town isn't perfect," June said. "These people aren't perfect. Neither am I. But some of us see you. Some of us want you here." Her voice softened. "I want you here, June. Christmas dinner tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Sarah's making her grandmother's pie. We need you there, both of you. Because you're not outsiders anymore. Not to us, maybe not to this town either. If you give them another chance." She pulled back the cloth on the basket. Fresh bread. Still warm. Jam. Cookies Sarah had made. "Let's make our own family for the day," June said. "And then you decide stay and keep building, or go, but don't leave because you're afraid. Leave only if it's truly what's best." Ethan's defenses cracked. His throat closed around words he couldn't speak. Timothy looked up at his father, desperate hope in his eyes. "Will you come?" June asked. Ethan managed a nod. June's smile was like sunrise. Good. 2:00. Don't be late. She touched Timothy's cheek gently, then left before Ethan could find his voice. Father and son stood in the quiet room, the basket between them like a promise. We're staying, aren't we? Timothy whispered. Ethan pulled his son close, felt small shoulders shake with silent tears. Yes, son, we're staying. We're going to fight for this. Fight for belonging. I'm glad. Me too. But that night, they ate June's bread and Sarah's cookies. Timothy talked about what he'd wear tomorrow, what he'd say to Sarah, whether he should bring something as a gift. Ethan listened and thought about June's words. Running from loneliness just brings it with you. She was right. He'd been running from grief, from fear, from the risk of trying and failing again. But June had come to them, had climbed those stairs on Christmas Eve to remind them they weren't alone. That was worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth believing in. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Ethan and Timothy dressed in their Sunday best, nervous and hopeful in equal measure. At June's house, warmth spilled from every window. Inside, the smell of roasting turkey filled the air. Sarah had decorated with pine boughs and candles. A fire crackled cheerfully. Boy need be. The meal was simple but abundant. Turkey, potatoes, vegetables preserved from summer. Sarah's pie, golden and perfect. They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the company. Afterward, they sat by the fire. Timothy and Sarah played cards while the adults talked quietly. You've given us more than meals. Ethan said to June, You've given us hope. June's eyes were bright. You've given me purpose again, reason to set more than one plate. Tom used to say a house becomes a home when it's filled with people who matter. Do we matter? The question came out smaller than Ethan intended. You do to me. Her hand found his, warm and certain. You matter. Ethan Hayes. Both of you. The new year arrived with fresh snow and clear skies. Sunday service felt different somehow. The light through the windows brighter. The hymns sweeter. After the final prayer, Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit. Friends, I want to talk about spring plans. We've discussed creating a community garden, a space where families can grow vegetables together, share the harvest, teach our children about cultivation and care. The murmurs of approval rippled through the congregation. We'll need someone to coordinate the effort. Someone with knowledge and dedication. The pastor paused. I'd like to open the floor for nominations. Silence stretched for a moment. Then June Brennan stood. Her voice carried clear and strong. I'd like to propose Ethan Hayes for the role. Every head turned. Ethan's heart stopped. He's got a gift with growing things. June continued. He helped winterize my garden, showed me techniques I'd never learned. More than that, he's shown nothing but good character and dedication to this community since arriving. He'd do the work well and fairly. The silence felt enormous. Then Pastor Williams' wife stood. I second that nomination. Mr. Hayes has been nothing but respectful and kind. I think he'd serve well. Another woman spoke up. He did beautiful work on June's garden. I saw it myself. The mill foreman added his voice. He's a hard worker at the mill. Honest as they come. I'd trust him with this. More voices joined. Not everyone. Not all at once. But enough. More than enough. The pastor smiled. All in favor of appointing Ethan Hayes as community garden coordinator. Hands rose across the congregation. Ethan watched, throat tight, as the community that had kept them at arm's length now welcomed them in. Motion carries. Pastor Williams said, "Mr. Hayes, will you accept?" Ethan stood on shaking legs. Timothy gripped his hand, tears streaming down his small face. "I will." Ethan managed, "I'd be honored." Applause rippled through the church, warm and genuine. After service, families approached. 3 different dinner invitations came before they reached the door. The merchant's wife asked if Timothy wanted to join the children's choir. 2 men asked Ethan's advice about their own gardens. The circles had opened. Timothy tugged his father's sleeve. "Pa, look." They stood in the middle of the church, no longer in the back pew. Around them, community flowed and eddied, and they were part of it now. Woven in, threads in the fabric instead of loose ends, Ethan found June in the crowd. Their eyes met across the sanctuary. She smiled, and he understood this was her gift. Not just the Sunday dinners, but the advocacy. The willingness to vouch for their worth when no one else would. She'd unlocked the door. Now it was up to them to step through and stay. Outside, the January sun made the snow glitter like scattered diamonds. Families clustered in groups. But this time the cluster shifted to include Ethan and Timothy. "Join us for dinner," one family offered. Ethan smiled. "Thank you, but we have plans." He looked at June, question in his eyes. She nodded. "Yes." She said, "We have plans." Spring arrived slowly. Then, all at once, snow melted into mud. Mud dried into earth. Earth warmed into possibility. The community garden took shape on land donated by the church. Families worked side by side, turning soil, planting seeds, building fence rails. Ethan coordinated with quiet competence, suggesting layouts, teaching techniques, settling disputes with patient fairness. Children played in the pathways between plots, Timothy among them, no longer watching from the outside but running and laughing with friends who knew his name. Chakotkat. The town had transformed, or perhaps Ethan and Timothy had transformed within it. Either way, they belonged now. Truly belonged. June and Ethan's courtship unfolded with proper dignity. Sunday dinners continued, but now with witnesses who approved. Garden work side by side, long conversations on her porch, while Timothy and Sarah did homework together inside. The touch that had startled them in November became natural by March. Hand-holding while walking from church, his arm around her shoulders in the garden's evening light. Small intimacies that felt both new and inevitable. By late spring, Ethan had saved enough from the mill to buy a small house at the edge of town. June helped him make it beautiful curtains for the windows, plants for the porch, care in every corner. "It needs a woman's touch," she said, arranging wildflowers in a jar. "It needs you," Ethan replied. She turned, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. Love, yes, but more than that, recognition. They'd both been lonely, both been broken by loss, both found healing in the simple act of opening doors instead of closing them. "Marry me?" he said, not a question, but an invitation. "Yes," June answered, no hesitation, no doubt. They married in midsummer in the same church where they'd once sat alone. The sanctuary overflowed with genuine well-wishers. Timothy stood proud as Ethan's best man, only 8 but trying so hard to be grown up. Sarah stood with June, beaming. Pastor Williams spoke about community, about second chances, about how love grows in soil prepared by grief and tended with courage. The reception filled the community garden they'd built together, tables laden with food from every family, children weaving between the vegetable rows, laughter rising into the warm evening air. Ethan stood with his new wife, watching Timothy chase Sarah through the bean plants. The boy's laughter carried pure and bright, unmarked by the loneliness that had haunted his early days here. Hard to believe, June said softly. 6 months ago. You were strangers walking home alone. You changed that. We changed it. You were willing to stay, willing to try again even when it hurt. Families approached to offer congratulations. The same people who'd overlooked them now embraced them. Not because Ethan and Timothy had changed, but because someone had shown the community what they were missing. As evening fell, guests drifted toward the church for dancing. June and Ethan lingered in the garden, watching the last sunlight paint the mountains gold. Tom would have liked you, June said. He always said the best people are the ones who've known loneliness and chosen kindness anyway. Sarah would have liked you too. Ethan kissed her hand. She always wanted me to find happiness again. Have you... He looked around at the garden growing green and strong, at Timothy's friends scattered among the plots, at the community that had finally opened its arms, at this woman who'd saved them from isolation, with nothing more than a Sunday dinner invitation. Yes, he said, I have. They walked home as the stars emerged. Not to the room above the store, but to their house, their home. Timothy and Sarah ran ahead, already planning which bedroom would be whose. Ethan opened the door to lamplight and warmth. The windows glowed, welcoming into the summer dusk. Inside, Sarah was showing Timothy where his books could go on the new shelf. June set about making tea like she'd done it 1,000 times before. This was what he'd crossed half a continent to find. Not just shelter, but home. Not just survival, but family. Not just existence, but belonging. The difference between that first cold Sunday and this warm evening wasn't the town. It was that someone had seen them and said, you belong here, and now they did. June handed him a cup of tea, her smile soft and knowing. Timothy called from his new room, asking about hanging a drawing Sarah had made him. Outside, voices drifted from neighbors' homes. The merchant called good night as he passed. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere down the street. All the sounds of community, of connection, of belonging earned and given freely. Ethan stood in his doorway, looking out at the town that had become home. The same mountains, the same streets, the same church, but everything was different now. Because one woman had crossed the lawn on a cold Sunday and offered an invitation. Because she'd vouched for strangers when no one else would. Because she'd shown a community its own capacity for warmth. The table that welcomes strangers becomes the heart of community. At Chao Sai Bao, Ethan closed the door gently, sealing the warmth inside, and turned toward the family that waited for him. He was home. Finally, truly home.